Hello, I'm Marinta Skupin, Curator of Education here at Laguna Art Museum. You're about to watch a virtual tour of the exhibition Wayne Thiebaud Clowns by art historian Dr. Julia Friedman, and we'd like to extend a heartfelt thank you to the following sponsors: the Segerstrom Foundation, Robert and Karen Hone, Stephen and Robin Kaloda, James and Pamela Muzzy, Lou and Laura Roll, Suzanne and James Meller, and Constance Glenn. Thank you for your sponsorship and enjoy the tour.
It is appropriate that we start our tour of Wayne Thiebaud's Clowns with the painting of a single clown. This clown standing in a circle by himself reminds us of P.T. Barnum's saying that clowns are the pegs of the circus. And clowns in this exhibition are certainly the pegs of the show. In this exhibition, we have two images of this clown. One of them is this painting. Another one is a drawing in brush with black ink. It is interesting that although they show the same figure, they look like completely different artworks because Thiebaud, part of his mastery is his ability to translate images into different media, making them look completely different. So in the drawing of the clown, the schism behind the clown into which he's about to fall, to the amusement of the crowd maybe, is a very dark velvety spot. The clown painting also points to the ambiguity of the series, because the clown is not exactly acting, but he's just there being himself. Or is he? What is interesting about the clowns in the exhibition is that they were inspired by Thiebaud's memories of Ringling Brothers in P.T. Barnum Circus that he saw as a young teenager in the 1930s in Long Beach, California. This was a very American circus, and Thiebaud emphasizes the fact that it was an American circus in his interview, which is printed in the catalog for the show. So why is it important? You probably know that Thiebaud's fame came to him in the early 1960s when he began painting particularly American foods, the pies and the ice creams and all the things that you find in particularly American dining spaces called diners. And all of that was flooded with particularly American fluorescent light, then a novelty. And so Thiebaud's work from the very beginning has been associated with what we call Americana. As you know, Wayne Thiebaud turned 100 years old this past fall. This show has been painted over the period of 5 years, but it does look back at the work that he has done over decades, going all the way back to his famous paintings of the 1960s. This painting is called 100-Year-Old Clown. Thiebaud says that this is the summary of the series, and indeed it was the last work that he painted when the rest of the paintings and drawings in the show were already on their way to the Laguna Art Museum. The painting is a fascinating painting on several levels. First of all, it summarizes the series as a painting that is a self-portrait in a way, and it references a much earlier self-portrait, a proper self-portrait that Thiebaud painted in 1993. In that other work, Thiebaud wears the exact same coat as the 100-Year-Old Clown. Is it a self-portrait? Well, Thiebaud did turn 100 years old last fall, as I mentioned. So there's that, but as you can see, the figure is posed in profile, which is a very unusual aspect for a self-portrait. So it is much more than a proper self-portrait of Wayne Thiebaud, the painter. It is more of a reference to the idea of a self-portrait of an old artist. And in that, it goes back to the work of one of Thiebaud's favorite painters, Pierre Bonnard, who in the early mid-1940s painted several self-portraits which are very much in dialogue with the 100-year-old clown. On a different level, this painting is interesting because it actually encompasses different genres that Thiebaud has been working with throughout his career, and as well as different kind of familiar tropes of Thiebaud's painting. Let me give you some examples. So, for instance, if you look at the background of the painting, it has this very vivid kind of bluish white background with streaky brush strokes. And this is something that became Thiebaud's trademark, starting with the foodstuffs paintings of the early 60s and then going through the portraits and so on. Then there is the skull cap of the clown looks like a mountain in itself. So if you think about Thiebaud's mountain paintings that he has been working on since mid-1960s, the skull cap looks like a landscape as a mountain painting in itself. Then if you look at the ear of the clown, if you could zoom into the ear and take a look at details, the ear really resembles the Delta paintings, the Sacramento Delta paintings, which show geometricized, abstracted versions of the topography of the river. Then there's the jacket of the clown, and the jacket, because it's black and because it has a zip line down the middle, reverberates with Thiebaud's cityscape paintings of San Francisco with the black top and the painted lines on the asphalt. And of course, there are the still lifes. And the still lifes influence is seen both in the kind of caking impasto makeup of the clown on his cheek, this little white layer, and very importantly in this very kind of smudgy little red dot on the nose of the clown, which again brings us back to his dialogue with Pierre Bonnard, because Bonnard's paintings were about the vulnerability of old age and about painting and about imperfection. And this is something really important for Thiebaud because he is always trying to show us that there's no finality, there's no right way to do things. Everything is an investigation, and so is this series. And so one good way to think about the clowns is a contemplation on the human condition, and not some sort of judgment or even representation of circus memories. It is something much larger, and I think that this painting encapsulates it fantastically well. Thiebaud refers to this double portrait of clowns as a drawing, even though it is on canvas. There might be two reasons for that. One is in 1975, Thiebaud copied a drawing by Honoré Daumier, which shows two figures, and you can see that the composition is really quite similar to the two clowns. The other reason might have to do with the tentative quality of drawings. As you can see here in this work, some of the lines are raised. It is consistent with Thiebaud's proclivity not to look for perfection, but to show the most important things through tentative gestures. The way the two figures are posed shows humanity of the clowns behind the clown makeup, outside of the time of the performance. First and foremost, we have here a picture of two friends, the older one his hand gently cupping the shoulder of the young clown. And so one way to think about this particular representation is the circus as the microcosm of humanity, with the same traits, with the same relationships that people have in real life. Friendship, adversity, and so on and so forth. This multimedia drawing is simply called Clown with Striped Pants. Notice that only one clown is mentioned, although clearly there are two clowns. And the drawing really continues this theme of ambiguity that is quite prominent elsewhere in the show. Let me explain. So first of all, so you see the clowns are in this, it could either be interpreted as an embrace, or it could be a depiction of perhaps a wrestling match. And the reason we're not quite sure about what is happening is because one of the clowns has his mouth in the frown, whereas another clown has his mouth in what looks like a smile. Now, that in itself is also very significant for the exhibition at large, because the theme of the tragicomic, the combination of tragedy and comedy and the tension between the two, is really quite an important component for the content of the show. These two figures reappear in the show in at least two different variations. There is one drawing which is really quite a straightforward drawing of two dancing clowns. As you can see, they're wearing their street clothes and they're happily hopping about in the dance. Again, though, the motif repeats. You have one clown frowning, another clown smiling. And then there's a painting, also a painting of two dancing clowns. But in the painting, things get a bit more complicated because, first of all, the clowns, and that kind of chimes with the idea of clown in striped pants, as in one clown. There are two clowns, but the clowns merge into a conjoined twin almost. You have two bodies, you have synchronous pair of legs, but then you have only two arms visible, so it kind of looks like the same figure. You almost get an impression of figures being pulled together by the background. So the background is really important. It is activated by the figures, but the background also in a way activates the figures. It creates this conjoined quality in the dancing clowns. In this multimedia drawing, again, you have clowns behind the scenes, as it were. And this drawing is as much about what happens formally in the piece as it is about the actual action or the absence of thereof. So what we have here is we have one clown standing in front, and his hands are in his pockets. And then it gets a bit more confusing because the patterns of the clothes and different details of facial features, such as the mouth of the clown here and the nose of the clown above the left shoulder of the standing clown, blend with the patterns in the picture. So you have here two things going on. You have the stripes, which manifest themselves in the curtain behind and then in the coat of the standing clown. And then you have the circles, and the circles are both the polka dots of the clothing and the mouth and the nose, and those little highlight dots on the colossus of the standing clown. And then there's another layer to this whole thing. It's a tonal, it's basically a tonal study, because you have the areas of dark and the areas of light, and the juxtaposition of the two creates this complexity of the image that at the first glance looks like, makes it look like a single monolithic figure. So this is one interesting example. And then really kind of the opposite of this solid presentation, you could see in this little drawing, clown group, so another clown group, same title. In this case, you have a little small drawing. It's a line drawing done with a pen, and you can see it has been done very swiftly. So the character of the presentation of this clown group changes completely. Instead of this solid tonal representation, you have a very dainty play of the incline, which is best probably described by saying that it is a series of arabesques, a series of little patterns that weave together and create those kind of little doodly lines. So essentially the same subject matter, completely different content in these two works. In the interview published in the catalog for the show, Wayne Thiebaud talks about this painting called Clown and Makeup, and he says that this is the most puzzling painting for him. We don't quite know why. He did mention the tattoo, which, as the interviewer pointed out, also doubles as a signature for Thiebaud on many of his paintings. But the painting is really truly quite complex. So as you look at this painting, you see the seated clown, and the clown is in a way pushed back by the counter or a table covered with yellow pigment, and on that table or counter there's a plate with makeup and a makeup brush. Now the ambiguity starts already there, because on the plate, as you look at the makeup, you could also see perhaps Thiebaud's favorite lemon meringue pie, as well as makeup. And the brush looks a bit like a spoon or a fork. But also, what's really interesting here is that the brush is positioned in the way that it kind of continues an arm that is cut off by the counter, so it would have been a foreshortened arm. So in a way, the brush is a continuation of the arm or the forearm, and that might or might not be a metaphor for a painter having the brush attached to his hand or his arm. So there's that. Then, when you look at the face of the clown, you see this really faint smile. It's not a happy smile, it's sort of a wistful smile, which really goes together with this whole persona of the Depression-era clown. And the Ringling Brothers circus that Thiebaud was visiting was the Depression-era circus. So now we're looking here at a tramp clown, a clown who is down in his fortunes, perhaps somebody like Weary Willie, Emmett Kelly's famous clown, or maybe Otto Gribling's clown. So he's a bit sad, and he's also shadowed on his, on his left. There's a shadow, but again, the shadow is ambiguous because it looks at once as a shadow. That's kind of the first reading you have. But then also, if you look closely, you could probably notice that the shadow looks as if he's looking back. So then it might suggest a mirror, which gets us back to, gets us to the most enigmatic mirror painting of Western modernism, the Manet's Bar Folie Bergère, where the barmaid is reflected in a way that is completely incongruous. Again, the ambiguity that permeates the whole series, but is really quite visible in this work. Now, the smile, which is also one short step away from the frown, hints at the tragicomic quality, which is the premise of the series, and we could see it really quite well in another preparatory painting, which falls into the clown and makeup and wardrobe. There's a painting of a clown tie, which has on it a smiley face combined with the tearful eyes. Again, the tragicomic component. Once the makeup is on and the costumes are on, the big show begins. Here's a big act for you. You could see in this one, there's a clown and what looks like a tiger, but it's actually another clown. And that we know from Thiebaud's recollections in the interview, which is printed in the catalog. So a clown here sporting a skin of a beast, lying on top of another clown. The expressions that they have are really telling, because contrary to what you might think about, the big heavy beast pressing in the little clown, the tiger actually has his head tilted in a very loving attitude, and it's almost kind of like a mother looking at her child, and the clown at the bottom doesn't seem too distressed either. All of that, of course, is completely consistent with what Thiebaud says about the attitude of the paintings in the show, he said that I don't want any anger. I don't want clowns to be threatened. And so this indeed is a very happy painting. Now, there's also, you could see, if you look at the formal elements, we continue to see this play between the circles and the stripes represented by the stripes of the curtain and the stripes on the pelt of the tiger, and the stripes on the socks and the costume of the clown. And then the circle, of course, is this lit space, the oval space, and then the round hat, which is perched straight in the middle of the edge of the outline of this lit space. So again, you have stripes and circles. As we just saw in Clown and Beast, circus is a magical place where anything can happen, but nothing bad will happen. One other place where disbelief is suspended and where there are no physical consequences for action is cartoons. Cartoons and comic strips and animation. The two clowns here are about to bump their noses, and yet we don't get a feeling that something bad is going to happen. We know it's all going to end well. And this has to do with this function of cartoons and the suspension of disbelief, where there are no physical consequences. How are we cued into the fact that these are cartoons? So say the clown on the left, the way his knees are kind of coyly tilted in the way that Minnie Mouse or Mickey Mouse legs would be, the shoes that are clown shoes, but again, also they recall cartoons. The gloves, well, definitely a Mickey Mouse reference. And at the same time, you could see that this is an actual human being. This is an actual human clown. It's a man. You could see that he's shirtless. You could see a bit of his chest hair, the hair in his arms. And so all this detail is completely taken from life. But at the same time, when we look at the image, we see, along with the representation, we see the halos of color that suggest that there's not just a physical act, but there's also an imaginary act of a drawing happening in real time. Thiebaud grants a lot of credit to cartooning and cartoons. One of the figures that he cites quite a lot in his interviews is George Harriman, famous cartoonist and the author of the Crazy Cat. And quite a few things in this series come from Harriman, or sort of they look like mediated Harriman. The most obvious thing, aside from the suspension of disbelief component, are the little halos and the spotlights around the figures of the clown. There's another interesting element there. At some point in his life, Thiebaud was actually a lighting technician for the theater, so he's really quite familiar with that phenomenon. Another image that has two bumping clowns in the show is an etching, which is done a little bit later, and in this etching you could see again two clowns bumping noses, but here, because it is more appropriate for the medium of the etching, you could see that the clowns are floating above those little spotlight circles, except for the spotlight circles are done in this crisscross pattern, which is very characteristic of the etching technique. So again, as many other times in the show, we're cued into the differences between perhaps similar subjects represented in different media. In this exhibition, there are at least three paintings that kind of point out to clowns' misfortunes. One of them shows a clown behind the bars, and the other two are here. The one on my right is a naked clown. This is actually one of those ambiguous paintings where we're not quite sure if this is a clown who is bathing and somebody walked in on him, or if this is a manifested nightmare of being naked in the stadium or in the circus. So we really don't know, but we do feel this vulnerability from the way the figure of the clown is presented, the way he's kind of hunched forward a little bit and looking ever so tentatively over his left shoulder. The other painting shows a clown standing under a rain cloud, literally. So there's a rain cloud and the rain is coming only in the, on top of the clown, and there's something that is somewhere in between the puddle and also a spotlight, again, the motif that recurs in the show. This is probably one of the most obvious references to Harriman's Crazy Cat cartoons with its spotted clouds and spotlight circles. The clown here, we can't really see the expression too well, but from what we can see, it's almost kind of resigned, it's indifferent. That's what happens in life. So again, we circle back to this idea of circus and clowns being a microcosm of our lives. This beautiful little painting called Dog Clown. The title is significant here because it shows that Thiebaud doesn't think of dogs as just animals in the circus, but he thinks of them as actors, as clowns in their own right. That idea is carried over in another painting in the show, which is called Waiting Clowns. In that painting, as you can see, there's an image of a clown and a dog sitting there waiting for something. This little dog might or might not be Knucklehead, the dog of Lou Jacobs, a famous Ringling Brothers clown. On this side, there's another clown and dog, and in this case, so this is a drawing. I would like to point out here the way Thiebaud uses this image for some really interesting formal exploration. As you can see, the whole image is keyed around the shape of the circle or the sphere. So you have the hands of the clown holding the ball, on the shoes of the clown, that thing in the front is also round, and as is the reverse spotlight. And then, of course, kind of the round mug of the dog. And the backside of the clown. When on one of my visits to Thiebaud's studio, he took this drawing and he turned it on its side to make one really interesting point, which had to do with any image being inherently abstract. So even though in this image you might have say a figure of the dog with the clown perched on top of him, but at the same time this is also an arrangement of shapes, which does not depend on the subject matter necessarily of the image. Clown misfortunes naturally lead to clown rescue. In this painting from 2014, so this is one of the earliest works in the show, we see clowns exiting the stage where one clown is pulling the body of his pal out of the arena. This is the end. Which leads us to one of the most wonderful works in the show, The Bowing Clown. Here you have a combination of all of the motifs and all of the ideas that we see in other works in the show. There is a shadow which is as important as the clown, and the clown is engaging with the audience, and yet he stands there in solitude, just like the clown that we saw in the very beginning of the tour that was just standing there doing nothing. So not a routine, just being there. The clown condition is the human condition, and this is what Thiebaud's show represents so well. I would like to end by quoting to you a passage from Henry Miller's 1948 novella, The Smile at the Foot of the Ladder. This is a book that, according to Thiebaud, was one of the main sources for the clown series. Miller compares clowning and circus with our lives. Here's what he says. Like a clown, we go through the motions, forever simulating, forever postponing the grand event. We die struggling to get born. In the end, this is about the clown who is the pin of the circus. Thank you for joining me on this tour of Wayne Thiebaud's clowns. This was only a tour of highlights of the show. There are almost 4 dozen paintings in the show, but I hope that you will have a chance to see the show in person.